About 2 years ago, I created a series of self-portraits to share my testimony with you guys. So I know many of you have seen the series called um, the mental health healing story on my YouTube channel. But recently, I've had a couple encounters with people where I realized I actually never finished the entire testimony. I've gone through like a couple of videos depicting or just kind of sharing my journey with mental health crisis, going from confusion to a complete state of almost a breakdown, loss of myself, eating disorders, promiscuous behavior, and just a really feeling being on the brink of almost being hospitalized and really just so sort of disappearing. Then there was a sudden intervention, and I tell the story of how God did a miraculous sudden breakthrough and healing, and I came back, and that's this last picture here. If you want to hear the full story, please go to my YouTube channel and check out the videos. I know it's been really encouraging and helpful to some people who have loved ones that are struggling, or maybe you're struggling and this could be a reference point for you. But there is more to the story, and I really struggled with how to tell the last part. I've prayed many times for the right visual for it, and most of the time I can, between creativity and inspiration and God, I can come up with something. But for this part, I just haven't quite been able to nail down, like, how do you depict this? And I think the reason is clear, is that you just can't. You can't depict what happened to me next. So I'm just going to tell it. I hope speaks to every person who's thought about life, after death and what happens when we die. So at the end of my last video, I kind of leave off that I had been in a park and God broke through suddenly, and He touched my mind in such a way that all of the voices that I was hearing, all of the chaos in my mind, the anxiety, the depression, the compulsions, the constant voices that were just completely drowning me out, suddenly came to a complete stop. And it was absolute clarity, quiet, and peace. And I was back to normal. So I had always asked, my therapist and the different people, why can't I just be that person again? Because I wasn't always like this, and they had no answer for that. But when God touched me and I woke up from that experience, I was that person again. It was like I had been gone and suddenly I was just back. But I did go visit, a church and talk to people, and was getting, biblical instruction a little bit. But my heart was set on going to New York City because my dream was to become an artist or a graphic designer back then, because we didn't believe that fine artists could really make it. So you would become a graphic designer and hopefully do art on the side somehow, or a teacher or something. So, but that was my dream, was to go to New York City, to FIT, the Fashion Institute of Technology. And so that same month, when I suddenly felt better, I had my audition for the school, and we went, and I had to do all these kind of competitive drawing and different things with different students. And of course I got in, and it was like a dream come true. And so it was only a few weeks later that I had to move everything over to my dorm room, and suddenly I was living in New York City. I brought this Bible that was given to me. I felt new. I felt like I had a brand new start on life. I felt hopeful. I was energized. There was no eating disorder, compulsions of any sort. I mean, I was clear. I didn't even know how to explain it. So I got there, and by the first month or the second month, or like September, October, of course, it's an art school, right? So we are in the middle of all the craziest creatives and the biggest, most impressive city in the world back then was amazing. And you would get these free flyers to go to clubs. If you were in college, they really were kind of encouraging you to bring 50 friends at a time. And if you brought 50 friends, everybody would get free drinks, and you could easily fill up a whole line for the club, and that benefited them and it would benefit you. And so I started doing that. I started bringing all the people I could. And that was working out really well. They loved it. So I kept getting more invites to bring more people and get in for free and all these perks. And so just having fun, going out. And one night I was in a club, and I think it was like 3 a.m. or something. And I didn't really feel very much like partying. I wasn't really drinking that much. I was kind of just watching, and I think I was pretty tired because I had a lot of projects going on. But I'm sitting in the club, and I don't know where my friends are. That always happened. And there's people everywhere. I mean, everywhere, wall-to-wall people at 3 a.m. And, it's dark. I'm leaning against a wall, and there's people also leaning against this wall. So I'm like kind of leaning against a wall, and I'm kind of listening to the people on either side of me, and they're taking drugs, and I wasn't really into drugs like that. That was not my thing, but I was listening to them, and just kind of shocking me that they were taking like some really hardcore drugs. And I was just like, wow, I can't believe like this is happening literally right next to me. I'm just standing here. And then I looked up, and they changed the music, and all the people started crowding around this really big pole, and it was just like a sea of people, and it was really overwhelming to me. I was watching it, and it felt like it was going in slow motion, like everybody crowded around, and people were climbing up this pole, and there were drag queens and everything, and doing all this promiscuous stuff, and whatever. And people are chanting, and it was like so weird. It felt really slow motion, like I was outside of myself watching it. Suddenly I heard a voice. It like dropped in, and it was like, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing here. So I suddenly felt like I had to leave, and I got a cab and I went home. I remember, of all things, I was dressed up like a black widow spider that day. Well, I'll tell you something. I got back to my room, and then a few weeks later, I started to not feel good again. And I had a roommate who dabbled in witchcraft, and I was talking to her, and she was very lost. So I kind of knew I wasn't going to get any help from her, but I started feeling the sudden feelings of anxiety around food again. And then it was like somebody opened a door, and I felt the compulsion all over again. And then I started hearing the voices all over again, and it was like a flood had opened. And the Bible says when a spirit comes out of a man, a demon comes out of a man, he goes and he gets some other friends, and he comes back to check the place where he left as if it were a home. And if he finds it all cleaned up and empty, it's going to be worse for that person than it was when they had the only one, because now he's coming back with friends. And that's what it felt like. It was like something happened to me that was absolutely supernatural and divine, but that was it. And I was sort of coasting on this feeling of clarity and having peace again, but no God. Like, I had a Bible on the dresser, but that was about it. I mean, I was thankful, but that was it. And when the flood started coming back in, I remember talking to my roommate, and I was like, I can't do this again. Like, I can't go back to that. But there were no answers. So shortly after, in my sleep, I had a near-death experience. And I believe I probably had really hurt my heart during that time because I was overdosing on thyroid medication. I was drinking about 2 to 3 pots of coffee a day, all the things. So very extreme things I was doing to my body, and of course starving it. And the throwing up can really hurt your heart. And so something was happening where my heart was thumping in my chest in my bed, and I was going through atmosphere. It was pitch black, and then I remember it was going so fast. I tried to like flinch, like pull back from it, but I couldn't. And so I lifted my hands up and then noticed that they were not there. It was like my body was missing and it was see-through. And so I'm going so fast through this atmosphere, and I'm wishing with all my might that I could pull back from it, but I can't. And I knew where I was going was bad. There was no light at all. And then all of a sudden, it's like I didn't see anything, but I knew God was there. I knew God was there, and I could tell you, like, in a moment, it was like I was being seen 100%. 100% of who I really was. Every thought, every like intention. And it was almost like I had been in a haze, and now it was super, super clear. It's like God was looking completely at who I was completely, and I knew that he saw absolutely everything, and that I knew my completeness and he knew my completeness, and I had no words. It was like, it was terrifying. I can't explain the fear that I felt at being that exposed and knowing that I was being seen, because there was no words. Like, it didn't even occur to me to say, yeah, but nothing. It was so final and so complete. And I saw the images like of me being healed and the Bible on the dresser. And I just knew that I knew that I knew. And I know that God knew that I knew I should have done something with that, but I didn't. And I had no words. And then all of a sudden I just said, give me one more chance. And then I woke up. And I can't tell you the finality of that feeling. And, you know, the Bible says his eyes burn like a flame of fire. I hear that depicted as love, and he is love, and his love is unbelievable. But for this situation, those eyes felt like they were burning through me, and there was no escaping that gaze at all. So when I woke up, I've heard a lot of near-death experience stories that say the exact same thing. When you wake up, you kind of feel like you're suspended between the spiritual and the physical. And I remember going around my dorm room, you know, it's like, you know, early morning, like 1 a.m., 2 a.m., and I'm going around looking for people and asking them if they could see me, because I felt like I wasn't there. I wasn't quite there. And I was afraid that I had died. And somehow I was like in the middle somehow, but they kept telling me, you know, I see you, but I was shook. I was deeply shook. And the next day I grabbed my roommate and I said, you know, I don't care what you think, we have to go to church. And she was like, no, we're not. And I said, yeah, we have to, because I know that you're miserable and this is everything I ever wanted, but I can't slip back into that life that I had before again. And now this thing happened and I need to go to church. And so all I knew was that I had heard of Times Square Church. And so we walked the 40 blocks or whatnot to get there. Actually, maybe it was more like 20, but we walked a long way to get there. And I remember coming to the door, and when I grabbed the handle of the door, it was like electricity. I literally grabbed the handle of the door and felt this weird like sensation go through me. And I was like, wow, this is a really different experience. This place is like, there's like some sort of power here. And we walked in, and of course people are running up to us and like, welcome, welcome, and they're hugging us. And I was like, ah, you know, I was like, oh, please don't touch me. I'm not clean like you. I'm dirty. So you definitely don't want to touch me. And so we sat in the back of this huge theater. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's like this gorgeous theater type of building. And we sat way in the back, and we ignored all the worship. We ignored all the preaching. All we did was mock people and just watch people like, oh, why is this lady crying her face off? Why is she on the floor? Why is she dancing around like that? Like, these people are crazy. This is so embarrassing. And we were just being total jerks, you know? So, but then after a while, the weirdest thing happened. We're sitting in the seats and not listening, and I feel tears welling up in my eyes. And I'm like, what is happening? And I looked over, and same thing with her. And going, this is so weird. Why on earth am I crying? This like makes no sense, you know? And then all of a sudden, David Wilkerson was not preaching that day, but he was there. Carter Conlon was preaching that day, and he said this one verse, and he said, and suddenly, I have to say, when he said this, it was like his face was zoomed in, and it was right in front of my face. I saw him up close and clear. Don't ask me how. It just happened. And he said, you've been trying your whole life to do it on your own. Why can't you see that I've been saying, come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I'm going to give you the rest you've been looking for. And when he said that, it's like somebody cut my insides open. And all of a sudden, it's like I could see in my mind Jesus kind of around the corner of a door. And he was like, I've been here the whole time. And I was like, what? I mean, the simple statement was so profound in that moment to me. It was like I saw the ripple of all the things, the childhood disappointments, the different seasons of pain, the experiences that I had. And he was like, I was there the whole time. And, you know, I never heard of an altar call. I didn't know what that was. All I know is that, like, I stood up, dressed really crazy, and in front of 3,000 people, just ran up to the front. Nobody prayed with me. Nobody said a sinner's prayer. All I knew was that he wanted my life. He was like, I want your life. And I knew that I was in the middle of everything I ever wanted. You know, all the doors were opening, and I was so miserable and lost and empty. And an exchange happened. I remember closing my eyes. They were singing, I love you, Lord. I never sang songs like that, but I just said, I love you, Lord. And the more I said it, I could feel something completely pouring over me. And it was such an incredible sensation. And I knew that God was like giving me something for my life. I was giving him my life, and he was giving me like belonging. And when I left church that day, and I was walking all the way back to FIT, the only thing I could think of is I belong to somebody. I belong to somebody. I belong to him. And everywhere I went, nobody had to tell me like to change anything in particular, because there was nobody. But like I suddenly threw all my clothes out. I didn't want to listen to the music I was listening to anymore. I wanted to wear like pretty things and feminine things and like skirts, and I just wanted to, I felt beautiful, and I wanted to be beautiful for God. And it was so crazy and so supernatural. And I almost missed it. I was very close to missing it. And so what I want to say is that I couldn't paint this, of course. I couldn't paint this because it's too massive. I mean, we're all going to meet God. I had a preview of what that's like. And that's the way it's going to be for all of us. And maybe you've, like me, had some sort of experience with God where he did something for you. Maybe you said the sinner's prayer, or maybe you were somewhere, or maybe you just kind of do Christian things or go to the Christian church, but you're not like living with him. He's not a part of your decisions. Jesus is not someone you consult with, really. If you're really honest, if you're really, really honest, if you're really transparent with yourself, could you admit that maybe you're not living with him and working out your salvation with fear and trembling and experiencing the fullness of what he has? Maybe he's more of an add-on than he is the full thing. Well, I pray today that this would be a powerful catalyst to your reevaluating that situation and considering your relationship with Christ. Because I don't want anybody to miss it. But let me tell you, the last 30 years of living with Jesus has been full of crazy. And I could have done crazy without Jesus, and I could have done crazy with Jesus. And the only reason I'm here today is because Jesus is not only my foundation, my rock, my anchor, my friend. He's my history. He's my future. He's the one who sustains me, and he gives me clarity in the midst of everything. Why would you want to do life without him? So I hope this blessed you and gave you hope. And you know there's an answer, and his name is Jesus.